So moving on, the next thing we've got to talk to you about, Will, is all the drama that's going down in the Q world right now. So I don't even know where to begin with this one.
Drama alert, yeah.
Yeah.
Will, how close is the storm?
Well, okay. So I would like to unveil. I actually have a bit of an announcement about that. So,
wait a minute, the storm is here? Oh my God.
Yeah. So, the police are at your door, fellas. So, the first QAnon post that came out in October 2017 said, okay, Hillary's going to be arrested a week from now. Okay. And obviously that didn't happen. And so whoever's behind Q has since learned that you have to be a little smarter and you have to be a lot vaguer. But Q has still put a little marker down for November 11th, 2018. And that's a day after the big military parade in D.C.
Oh, God, they're actually doing that? Fuck.
Yep, still
God
on.
damn it.
QAnon people have become convinced that November 11th, 2018 is either when the storm is going to happen or it's the post-storm parade. So there's going to be like another parade, or maybe the other parade gets moved, and this is the one where like all the Democrats are in chains and like,
it's like a Roman triumph.
Behold before you Vercingetorix, the king of the Gauls.
Exactly. Because Q himself has said something like, oh, what a great parade or something. So all the QAnon chats
Ethel Merman reference there
with excitement over that event.
All of the coup plotters come in for a huge party.
Q Master Anthony.
They're going to be wheeling Hillary Clinton and the Podesta brothers in cages.
That would rule. Honestly, that would be awesome. But of course, it's nothing that fun ever really does happen.
No.
But so where I want to start with the Q drama is this, Will. Matt has said on the show, and I think one of his more prescient and uncanny predictions, that Q stuff would in a very short amount of time become standard cant for right-wing talkers on the stump, on cable TV, and even on the floors of Congress. And we were beginning to see sort of hints of that with Ted Cruz sort of signing on to the James Gunn pedophilia jokes stuff and being like, Disney needs to look into this or whatever. And then in Trump, in one of his very recent rallies, the media finally began to asking all of these people who showed up wearing Q T-shirts at his rally and sort of opened up this weird online subculture that's had been burbling for a while, covered by, you most likely. It was become opened up, and that do you think that contained the seeds of Q's current drama and problems that it's facing?
Yeah, so for a while now, various people on the right who are aware of QAnon, but not dumb enough to believe in it, have been very willing to sort of like play footsie with QAnon and say like Jack Posobiec and Mike Cernovich and Laura Loomer have tweeted things like, do you think Q's real? or they'll tweet like the Q slogan where we go one, we go all, and kind of like nudge, nudge, maybe I'm into Q. And so with QAnon breaking into the mainstream last week, people on the right, these kind of the MAGA world personalities realized, oh crap, like, this has gone too far, and too many of our fans actually believe this stuff. So they kind of launched this effort to fight back against it. The problem is people like Jack Posobiec are the worst possible people to do this, because Jack Posobiec, of course, was a big Pizzagate guy. I mean, these guys are inveterate liars already and promoters of conspiracy theories, and they seem to just be mad that QAnon is a grift they can't get in on.
Yeah. It's a work that they can't control, and it's beginning to become bigger than they are. So that's why I think you're seeing these people disown it.
Now, I remember that guy, David Seaman, who was one of the most shameless Pizzagate guys, flip out about Q, and now he's just this hardcore anti-Q conspiracy theorist, which is one of the funniest things to me. He's saying, look, you're all being taken for a ride. This is all bullshit. Here's why. Now, if you'll just come back and listen to me, I'll describe to you how we're going to get to the basement of Comet Ping Pong.
Well, the real
a lot of the main Pizzagate people have QAnon has a lot of Pizzagate elements, but a lot of the Pizzagate promoters hate QAnon, and so they're at their most lucid when they're making these points against QAnon. And then as you say, Virgil, they say, "Now let me tell you about Pedogate," but without QAnon attached. We saw this in the spring when Q turned on Alex Jones. There's a lot of shadowy ulterior motives, I think, going on behind these Q clues, but we saw this in the spring, and Alex Jones had taken Q and was getting really into it, and he kind of had created his own Q. And then Q came out and said, basically denounced him and Jerome Corsi. And then Alex Jones said, well, Q's been compromised. Q's controlled by the deep state now. So people are kind of fighting over this crowd of very gullible people.
You just figured out Q's clues. You just figured out Q's clues. You just figured out Q's clues because you're very smart.
But Will, over the past week, as you said, these other online right grifters have come out to say Q's all the work. You're stupid for believing it. How have the Q believers responded to this?
Oh, so this is great. So as with anything, these guys people like Jack Posobiec have spent years saying to people who now believe in QAnon, to their fans, saying, don't believe the media, just kind of unmooring these people from reality. Now they say, hey, come back. You need to believe in these things and stop believing in Q. And the fans go, my God, Jack is a deep state plant. And so they dug up this legislation passed by Congress that was going to spend like $160 million fighting Russian disinformation. And so then they become convinced that this $160 million is instead being used to bribe people like Jack Posobiec. And so now his fans are saying, Jack, I can't believe you took the money, that you're betraying us in this way.
One of the other figures who turned on QAnon was a friend of the show, Michael Flynn Jr. You mentioned in his piece that, he was like, hey, you got to stop with this Q stuff. It's embarrassing. And was then, deluged by all of his, because, Michael Flynn is like a big hero. He's the military guy that's fighting the deep state, because a big part of the Q conspiracy is this idea that there is a deep state, but the military isn't part of it, and the military is actually on the average Joe American side, and secretly fighting. The generals are on our side, and they're fighting the intelligence community. And then in your article in the Daily Beast, this is my favorite comment. One angry commenter on Michael Flynn Jr. said, I will hold my tongue out of respect for your father.
Yeah, a lot of QAnon people think Michael Flynn Sr. is Q. So this was like a big moment for Flynn Jr. to say, no, I don't have anything to do with this. People were very upset.
So these cracks are beginning to show in the facade. But even before this, didn't Q have a few fuck ups? He posted the photo of Air Force One that was just a shot from an AP photo from the Obama administration that was just reversed.
Yeah, Q's very into reversing images. And kind of posting these photoshops. There's a lot of disasters with Q. I mean, people are fighting over control of the account. The password will get inadvertently posted or maybe not inadvertently posted. There's a lot of backstage drama going on with Q. I mean, sort of once you realize, or once you accept, obviously, that Q is fake, then you say, okay, well, now who's behind it? And
right.
There's a lot of intriguing theories.
Now, Will, yeah, right. Can you describe some of these? Because I know there have been some interesting recent developments.
Yeah, so there are various accusations flying back and forth, usually amongst kind of smaller YouTube people who accuse one another of controlling Q and stuff like that. There's this group of cryptography people who claim today that they were the people who created Q and that it's since been taken by conspiracy theorists. Unfortunately, no one really has a lot of evidence to this. I don't know if you guys have seen that some supposed anonymous faction claims they're going to take down Q.
Okay.
It's a real weird throwback to Guy Fawkes mask era. And these guys are we're going to dox QAnon believers, but they're just doxing old people in Florida.
No. Get the guy that Newsweek said was Satoshi and just say that's Q.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. There's a lot of
Get Reddit on the case.
it would be in their best interest because they want to be like internet pranksters and they say, I created Q and stuff like that.
No, I'm Q. I'm Q. Well, one I saw was Jack Prilosek claimed to have been in touch with one of the people behind Q.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Like I said, there's a lot of like supposed leaks from Q World and stuff like that. And Jack claims to have gotten his hands on some of them. I don't know how real that's going to turn out to be. He's apparently working with Jerome Corsi, who, as I mentioned, used to be very into Q.
That is a blast from the past, Jerome Corsi. He's an OG.
He's still, very relevant in a very particular corner of the internet. And so Jack seems to be working with him to denounce Q in some way. So the sort of the Pizzagate people who hate Q are like eagerly anticipating this, like it's like a New York Times expose that's going to drop. They're like, Jack has the receipts. Watch out. So
that's just an amazing statement. The Pizzagate people who are against Q, like that's talk about ideological drift. These are, like today, the media considers people like Jeff Flake, a fucking right-wing Tea Party guy, to be a rational, moderate Republican. And now today, Q represents the ideological extreme of the Republican Party that needs to go back to its traditional conservative roots of Pizzagate.
I think a very telling moment was when one of the first guys willing to come out against QAnon was Dilbert creator Scott Adams. And, he's kind of the voice of reason calling these people back, just come back and believe in all his weird philosophy stuff.
Yeah, this is a bunch of phrenologists condemning like a patent medicine dealer for being a quack.
What about the people who think that JFK Jr. both faked his death and is Q?
Yeah, so this is a great example.
I had not heard of that.
Oh yeah. It is a great example of how QAnon has sort of created this pack of very gullible people and how various hucksters are fighting over them. So in July, there was sort of a mess up with Q, and Q disappeared for a little bit. I'm a little unclear on the details, but basically Q was a bit embarrassed because he had I believe it was the Air Force One picture you mentioned. So Q disappears, and then someone named R shows up, next letter in the alphabet. And Aranon
it's like a new Doctor Who.
Yeah, exactly. Aranon says, well, actually, you guys thought it was Michael Flynn or you thought it was Trump or whatever. Actually, Q and me is JFK Jr., who you thought died 20 years ago in a plane crash. But in fact, I faked my death because I'm best friends with Trump. And this has been a decades-long plan to take on the deep state. And so they do these people then are very eager to find proof that JFK Jr. is alive. And so they do things like they look at his grave, which is kind of in a circle, and they're like, oh, it's a Q.
Are they going through are they pouring through old issues of George magazine?
No, they are.
Really?
There is a quote going around, a fake quote from him talking about Trump being a great president someday that they claim was from an issue of George.
Yeah, they started like analyzing the covers, and they were making like crazy walls. The cover's just some like 90s supermodel, and they're like, see, like circling the words. And the big thing was there was a guy who was behind Trump at a Trump rally once, and this guy, kind of like a kind of scruffy looking fellow, and they go, oh, that's JFK Jr. in disguise.
This is like when Krusty faked his own death.
Yeah, so they say, look, no one looks like that normally. That man has to be in a disguise.
Yeah, that guy at the Trump rally who looks vaguely unwell, disheveled, and maybe not so connected to reality? It's got to be a put on.
So they figure out this guy's name, and then they're like, hey, buddy, like, we know you're JFK Jr. I mean, this guy almost blown this guy's mind. And so now this thing has gone so far that there are T-shirts on Amazon that say this guy's name, and it'll say, Vincent equals Q equals JFK Jr. equals R.
That's science.
This is like
that's the new math, baby. That's some Common Core right there. No, I found it. This is actually a thing. This is out there. It's circulating. It's a meme, and it is a fake quote from a 1999 issue of George magazine from the letter from the editor. Article by JFK Jr. that says, if my dear friend Donald Trump ever decided to sacrifice his fabulous billionaire lifestyle to become president, he would be an unstoppable force for ultimate justice. The Democrats with the RAT capitalized, and Repubs alike would celebrate.
Can we convince them that somehow Alfred E. Newman is Q and get them going through old issues of Mad Magazine for clues?
I do love the idea that they like this. I mean, these people obviously never read George magazine, which was the most insanely idiotic, vapid idea for a magazine in history. Only a cosseted scion dipshit like JFK Jr. could have thought of this idea. It was politics, but sexy. It was basically Politico with fucking models on the cover.
Wait,
One of the
hang
dumbest ideas ever put out.
Hang on. You're telling me a coddled rich kid had a bad idea for a magazine?
Yeah, I know. It's astounding.
Well, it's a very Trump era thing in that it's like a throwback to 90s Manhattan media drama. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like Graydon Carter and Anna Wintour and this now.
Will, I've heard that if you take the first letter from every paragraph that was ever published in Tina Brown's Talk magazine, it gives you the true identity of Q if you unscramble it.
Will, I want to ask you about one more, and I saw you post about this the other day. This Italian anarchist group, whose name I can't recall, is claiming that Q was inspired by them, and some people have taken this to believe that they are behind Q.
Well, yes. So I would say this. So this was in a BuzzFeed article. This sort of anarchist collective apparently wrote a book called The Story of Q or something, and it involves a government official named Q. All right. Well, so BuzzFeed sort of takes this and they say, this is, they call it extremely likely that this proves that Q is a leftist prank and all this stuff. And in fairness to this anarchist collective, they posted the full notes of this interview they did with BuzzFeed. And they're very sort of like, well, if it was inspired by us, then it's probably a liberal. So, the obvious comparison is, well, for all we know, Q is based on James Bond, right? Because there's a government official named James Bond in that. So I think the sourcing on who's behind Q is still a little shaky, but I'm eager to find out.
I mean, the story was written by Ryan Broderick, who is a famous dunce.
Look, you guys are all yakking and you're all undermining Q and you're saying that this is all bullshit. But to quote a patriot who was interviewed on CNN when she appeared at one of the Trump rallies last week wearing a Q shirt, who, just like you, said, there's no evidence for this. I say to you, there's no non-evidence either.
They've gotten very
QED.
Can you clear something up for me, Will?
Yes.
So is it certain that all of these posts are by Q? Like, what prevents someone from going on and saying, hey, guys, I'm Q?
Yes. So this is a thing that's kind of like at the core of who's Q. So on the Chan, so Q's posted on 4chan and 8chan. So normally people are anonymous on it, but you can choose to have a screen name. And the way you do that is you say, you type in your screen name and then you type in a password, and then that password generates a series of numbers and letters next to your screen name that display next to your screen name. So for example, Q, the first password for Q was Matlock. And so, like in a classic sort of baby boomer appeal. And so that password then is sort of twisted into letters and numbers. So it's like, exclamation point 3A, whatever. So then every time someone posted as Q, if it had that string after it, then people knew that it was Q. But you end up with things where Q inadvertently posts the password, or maybe not so inadvertently, or someone sort of the original Q disappears and someone else starts being Q with a different set of letters and numbers. So there is a way that prevents someone off the street from posting as Q, but the actual sort of like identity of Q is constantly shifting.
Wild.
But back to Matt's point about what the woman said at the Trump rally, that there's no non-evidence. A big thing that I've noticed, in reading your coverage of this, is when the people who are really truly believe in this are asked, what's the evidence for this, or like, why do you believe in this? One of the most common things that comes up is they say something to the effect of, nobody has disproved the proofs. All of Q's proofs are there, and they're bulletproof. But I've never heard anyone like follow up to be like, well, what are they? Because it just seems to me that like this is just a massive exercise in like, oh, do the reading, or I'm not going to do it's not my job to teach you. So everyone just sort of collectively assumes that all of this is real. And then when they're asked, why is it real? Or, what about this strikes you as authentic? They're like, just do the research.
Well,
you have to like dedicate like the same hundreds of hours that I have to reading every post, and then it will become, apparent to you. And I just think that's really sad because like, if you devoted that much of your life to like an interest or a hobby, you should be able to explain it to a layperson in a couple sentences.
No, reading all of that shit will just break your brain, and then you'll have to go through and watch all of these 50-hour-long YouTube videos, and then you have to go through every back issue of George and Spy magazine and all this shit. Your brain is jelly at the end of that.
But that's the thing. That's why they say that, because it's true. It's like something from Lovecraft or the fucking In the Mouth of Madness. If you take this journey, you will come out the other end a believer. By definition, by spending this time doing this, your brain will be rewired, and by the end of it, you will be a believer.
Yeah, I will say, as someone who's consumed just like unholy amounts of Q and Q related content, it does put a mental strain on you. Mentioning all the reading, though, it's kind of reminiscent of the whole Jordan Peterson situation, where he'll say things like, we need government wives or whatever, and then people will say,
I
that
require
sounds pretty messed up. And they're like, you fool, you haven't watched like 300 hours of Jordan Peterson lectures and read his 2 books, like you can't comment on this. So with all the proofs, there's just these countless proofs, and each of them is easily disprovable, but disproving them doesn't convince the QAnon people. Lee Stranahan, who's kind of a right-wing guy who's constantly battling QAnon people,
See the Starbucks
he said, I'll
guy?
take one proof a day. And so he's just knocking these things down. And of course, the QAnon people just bounce back up. So, it's really not worth anyone's time to
that really is funny that it's Lee Stranahan who's like the lonely crusader on this. If you're not familiar with this guy, he is like the Huckleberry Hound of the right. He is the most put upon, bullied person in that entire orbit. He just like, they left because they didn't like me, but now Breitbart is angry and well.
And that's tough to do because he's edging out Treacher. Also a historic sad sack.
Treacher recently was coming at me with something, and he got banned on Twitter. And
oh my god!
R.I.P. to a real one.
I will say, I was not involved in it, but there was some satisfaction. He's back of it.
No, Alex Jones is one thing, but I will draw the line. Bring back Jim Treacher on he will fucking lock himself in his garage with the car on
and post while it's happening.
I do have one last thing, and wheeling back to something you said. You mentioned Ted Cruz getting on the James Gunn thing. And the thing is, these mainstream Republicans playing footsie with the Q shit, that shouldn't be surprising because ultimately all of the Q stuff emanates from their demagoguery for the past several decades. I mean, it's an extension of the sicko Hollywood libs thing that they've been running against for years.
Yeah, and things like birtherism.
I mean, now there's this Vanderpump Rules sort of.
Oh
bit
my
player.
God, Will! that was the last thing I was going to ask you about.
Okay, so basically, there's this guy who is like a minor character on Vanderpump Rules, who's now a hero to QAnon people because he says everyone in Hollywood's a pedophile.
He accused Tom Hanks of being a pedophile. His name is Isaac Cuppy, and for fans of the Pump, we got some Pump fans out there. He is not he's extremely minor. He's never really been a character on the show. He's only been on the show as one half of Tom Sandoval's sort of funk pop group that cut a single. It was like a 2-man act. I forget the name of their band. Oh, it's called Charles McMansion. Charles McMansion. And they cut a single, sort of a funk pop single called Let's Touch in Public.
Let's touch in public. It's your asking love, 'cause girl, I wanna rub it.
So... So when I found out that this Isaac guy is now being interviewed by Roger Stone and Alex Jones and InfoWars and going on TV and saying, yeah, like I'm a Hollywood insider. I'm tapped into all the satanic pedophilia going on out there. All I can think of is the song Let's Touch in Public.
You need a form of invitation. Baby, just set yourself free.
Yes, exactly. But his whole revelations have been dubbed Hollyweird, which of course is like an ancient conservative thing.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I just think the Q stuff remains endlessly fascinating for me. You're the best person to cover it. It just, for me, I think what we're seeing now is the 21st century equivalent of the Millerites in the 1840s. And that I firmly believe, like, the more Q gets discredited, or like the more that these dates come and go without Hillary being frog marched through the streets, or without these huge dragnet arrests of all the pedophiles and criminals in the deep state, I think people are only going to believe in it more.
Yeah.
Like, just like the Millerites, are every time they predicted the end of the world, a date would come and go, world still goes on, their ranks would swell every single time. And I think this is just a replay of that same weird phenomenon.
Well, I'm going to go out and read Q post for 300 hours, and I'll report back on the truth here.
And it's only going to get bigger, and it's only going to be more a durable part of the right-wing narrative now, because it offers something that no other type of resentment and right-wing identity does, and that is interactivity. You don't just get mad at the libs. You don't just post Minions memes about ungrateful millennials. You are part of the story. You are a detective. You get to go and pore over the sickos' tweets and find things. I saw just today, there's somebody grabbed a picture of Chrissy Teigen sitting in her kitchen, and there's a big piece of meat, and there's a pineapple. And they go, well, the pineapple stands for adrenochrome, which is taken from the adrenal gland of children. And, of course, the raw meat stands for cannibalism. And it's just, that's fun.
It is fun.
You're involved in it. You're part of it.
You're
not just a
investigator.
fucking spectator like the rest of us. We're all just staring in mute horror at this parade of awfulness. Q people get to be part of unraveling the truth.
It's an ARG for boomers.
Yeah. I don't know what that is, but sure.
No, it is fun, and this is a side thing. There's apparently a campaign now called Verified Hate, which is looking up verified accounts for saying things like white genocide is awesome or white people are canceled. And I have to report that they got me at one. I did say white genocide owns. I'm in their crosshairs.
This is why you got to delete your tweets. I have a tweet that I think could have gotten me in trouble. It was after the Jinx was on, and I was calling for the Jinx to be freed. And
wait, who is that? Is that like the
you wanted Robert Durst? You were like, free Robert Durst.
Yeah,
Innocent, let him out.
Defense fund. So these guys, your Lucian Wintriches, your Jack Posobiec's, as Virgil says, have been going through people's stuff and finding white people.
However, I mean, a fun thing, another fun thing about this as a spectator is watching this like idiotic, this Pontypool style mind virus outpace all of the right-wing grifters who have stoked it for so long, and I think they're probably going to get left in the ditch by it. And that is pretty fun, even though if it is a genuinely disturbing phenomenon and experience in mass delusion, it is fun to watch guys like Cernovich and Prilosek who have, try consciously to cultivate the stupidest audience possible so that when it comes time to play wallet inspector, they'll, gladly cough it up, just be lapped by something even dumber and more ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild stuff. And an interesting thing about QAnon is it's creating sort of a counterculture that's separate from a lot of the other online right-wing grievance cultures. So, for example, I saw a QAnon thing going around today that was like, QAnon people don't complain. QAnon people don't search tweets. QAnon people don't. The big thing now is putting the X emoji in your Twitter handle on the right. And
what does that mean?
Means you're being shadow banned.
Yes, it means you are a victim of shadow banning. And
my posts aren't getting enough likes. It's clearly a conspiracy.
And so QAnon people say we don't do that. So it's almost like they're setting themselves apart from the rest of the MAGA world.
Twitter is deleting my DMs for my grandchildren. This is a conspiracy. It's the only reason why they don't contact me.
Well,
it's going to be great this Thanksgiving when so many people go back home and see that grandma's wearing one of these inscrutable shirts.
Oh, God. So many Q convos over the turkey this year.